If I can have your attention, please. Thank you. All right, thank you. So let's start with the formal part of the program. So thank you all. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. Again, my name is Philip Tardif, and I'm a board member of the Canadian Club, and today's host of the event. We're streaming this event live, and viewers, we're very pleased to have you participate in these proceedings today. For 120 seasons, the Canadian Club has been proud to provide a forum for leaders in every aspect of society to share their thoughts and ideas with us. Through our programs and activities, we offer access to dynamic political, business, and public figures. Today's event is a great example. Before I formally introduce today's dynamic speaker, here's a preview of some of our upcoming events. Tomorrow, Thursday, February 16th, the President and CEO of CIBC, Mr. Victor Dodig, will address our members. And on Tuesday, next Tuesday, February 21st, Senator Peter Harder will be at our club to talk about the transformation taking place in Canada's Senate. To order your tickets and to learn more about the Canadian Club, please view our website at canadianclub.org. You can also join the conversation via Twitter and Instagram by following us at CDNCLUBTO, Canadian Club, using the hashtag. I want to express our special thanks today to our event sponsor, National Bank Financial, represented by Mr. Brian Davis, Accenture, represented by Madeleine Chenette, and McCarthy Tetra, represented by Philippe Fortier. Thank you for your generous support. Let me also acknowledge the youth and young leaders who are with us thanks to the support of AirStart. Welcome, students, to Glendon College, and thank you for joining us. And now, for today's speaker. J'ai l'honneur de vous présenter M. Éric Martel. Hydro-Québec enjoys a well-established reputation as one of the leading suppliers of hydroelectric power in North America. With almost 20,000 employees, Hydro-Québec has been transmitting, generating, and distributing electricity for more than 50 years. And now the public energy company is joining the renewable energy revolution in a big way. Its research division is exploring ways to integrate solar energy and consumer-generated electricity into the provincial and the province's hydroelectric network. The person at the center of the action is Éric Martel, Hydro-Québec's president and CEO. He's been at the helm for a year and a half now. His priorities are clear and consumer-focused: proactive communication, sustained growth, improved customer service, and productivity. Before joining Hydro-Québec, M. Martel held senior roles in another well-known Quebec-based company, Bombardier. During his 13 years at Bombardier, he was a senior leader heading divisions such as Bombardier's business and aircraft division. He also served as president customer service. He's always brought a strong focus on customer service and quality to his leadership roles. M. Martel is recognized for having implemented a strong quality culture at Bombardier. An electrical engineer by training, M. Martel began his career with several leading global companies. These include Pratt & Whitney, Rolls-Royce, Procter & Gamble, and Kraft Foods. He also finds time to give back to this community. Since the early 2000s, Hydro-Québec's CEO has been actively involved in Centraide of Greater Montreal. M. Martel has kindly agreed to take questions from the audience. Please fill out your Q&A cards on the tables, and one of our staff members will gather them. And after Mr. Martel's speech, I'll read the questions to him and ask him to candidly answer them. Monsieur Martel, bienvenue. The Canadian Club's podium is yours. Please join me.
So good afternoon, everyone. I will do just a little bit of the presentation in French, if you don't mind. The slides, though, are in English. So first, I should say thanks for inviting me and, of course, representing Hydro-Québec here today, and have the opportunity to speak to the wonderful business community at the Canadian Club of Toronto. So maybe just to start, and I'll switch in French for a few slides after. clearly, we are in a very fortunate situation at Hydro-Québec. And I think thanks to our predecessor, the people that have made our history possible years ago, the heritage of Hydro-Québec is wonderful. You know, we are in a unique situation. We are producing renewable energy at 99.5%. You know, our rates are actually extremely low. We'll talk about it later. And clearly, but looking ahead, I don't think we have to be naive. The grid all around the world are under pressure, under a huge transformation. And I'll mention that, and I think we have a plan to address this, and I will be sharing this plan with you today. Alors, la première chose qu'on s'est dit à Hydro-Québec, c'est qu'on a reconnu qu'il fallait faire mieux. On a dit, on ne peut pas se gargariser des résultats qu'on a eus dans le passé. Il y a des choses que nos clients étaient insatisfaits et on s'est donné le défi de dire il faut s'améliorer. Et juste le fait qu'on a reconnu qu'on avait besoin de s'améliorer, je pense que notre clientèle a énormément apprécié. Entre autres, on avait besoin de s'améliorer avec nos clients. Je vous partage ici un sondage qui se fait chez Hydro-Québec depuis le début des années 90 qui mesure la satisfaction des Québécois envers Hydro-Québec. Hydro-Québec a toujours eu des bonnes marques. On était souvent dans le 88, 89 sur 100. Mais malgré tout ça, forcé d'admettre que il y a 18 mois, quand je suis venu en poste, on était à notre plus bas niveau historique, à 79. Alors, on n'avait jamais eu les Québécois aussi insatisfaits d'Hydro-Québec à cette époque-là. Et on a mis une stratégie en place. Et la bonne nouvelle, c'est que l'an passé, on a eu les 7 derniers mois de l'année avec un score plus fort que 90 et le mois de décembre à 95. Alors, on est parti de 79 et on s'est amélioré pendant toute l'année. Et on est très fiers de ça. Alors, qu'est-ce qu'on a fait pour réussir à changer à changer la vapeur de direction? D'abord, on a mis énormément d'emphase, puis les Québécois ont apprécié sur la satisfaction de nos clients, sur le service à la clientèle. Alors, je vous donne un exemple. Ici, on a baissé de 54 le temps moyen quand les gens appellent dans nos centres d'appel. Premièrement, on était ouvert, comme dans les années 80-90, de 9 h à 5 h. On n'avait pas de service en soirée, on n'avait pas de service le week-end. Je pense que c'est pas en ligne avec ce que la vie d'aujourd'hui est. Hein, souvent, aujourd'hui, les parents travaillent, ils n'ont pas le temps d'appeler Hydro-Québec à 9 h le matin. Alors, ça se passe à l'heure du lunch. Et là, nos lignes explosaient parce que tout le monde appelait en même temps. Alors, aujourd'hui, on est ouvert jusqu'à 9 h. On est ouvert les week-ends. On reçoit environ 12 000 appels par jour en passant. Là, c'est quand même un volume important. Puis, on en reçoit à peu près 7-8 000 appels, là, dépendamment des saisons, le week-end. Alors, les gens ont très bien réagi à ça. Vous voyez, nos plaintes de clients ont baissé de 36 en un an et demi. Et nos engagements à rencontrer des dates, quand les gens nous demandent des nouvelles connexions, des nouvelles constructions, on a amélioré de 35 le pourcentage de fois qu'on rencontrait la date promise aux clients. Alors, tout ça dans son ensemble, avec un emphase sur le service à la clientèle, nous a énormément bien servi auprès des Québécois et aussi une stratégie d'approche d'être présent. Il faut être humble quand on est un monopole. Et quand je suis arrivé à Hydro-Québec, je disais aux gens, le mot client n'existait pas. Et je disais aux gens, ce n'est pas parce qu'on est un monopole qu'on ne doit pas satisfaire nos clients. Au contraire, c'est un privilège qu'on nous donne. Et parce qu'on nous donne ce privilège-là, on devrait être une référence en service à la clientèle. Alors, c'est l'objectif qu'on s'est donné jusqu'à présent. I think another important thing also is on productivity. We mentioned productivity as a priority at Hydro-Québec. We've been at it for a long time. But this is an interesting slide because it compares 1986 to 2016, that 30 years apart, and it shows where we were and where we are. But the first thing I want to bring to your attention is the number of employees. We are actually running today Hydro-Québec with less people than we had in 1986. So it's been, important for us, and we have about close to 20,000 employees. We peaked at some point in the 90s at 27,000 people. If you look, though, we're managing a much broader customer base. We had 2.7 million customers at the time. Today, we have 4.2 million. And if you look at the asset, of course, in equivalent value, we were managing like all the hydro capability and infrastructure of a $31 billion asset. Today, we have $75 billion of asset to manage. So when you put all this together, we do, with the same number of people, roughly, than we had 30 years ago, much more in terms of serving customer and in terms also of managing our asset. One thing that we are extremely proud is the model that's been put in Quebec basically, which is pretty much all around hydroelectricity, puts us in a very nice position. We have the lowest electricity rate in North America. It's about a quarter of, if you look at Boston and New York, it's about 25% of what they're paying at their invoice for the same thing. So, of course, our model is also very predictable. And this is an interesting slide also that will take 2 minutes to explain. If you go from 1963, and you take $100 of electricity produced by Hydro-Québec, $100 of natural gas, and $100 of oil, and you escalate it over the years, and you say, what are people paying today? If you go to 2015, and you look at the dotted line is basically inflation, CPI. If you look at electricity, it correlates perfectly pretty much with inflation. It's actually a little lower. So your $100 of electricity in 1963, you're paying something like $7.50 today, and it's perfectly correlated. If you look at oil and gas, of course, it's less predictable. There's a lot of variation. Despite the fact that, you know, oil, as an example, went down quite significantly, you see the sharp curve at the end going down, it's still much more expensive, you know, than the $100 of electricity. So the message here is this is one thing that is unique because we are making with, you know, with our hydropower, huge investment at the beginning, which are risky sometimes, you know, and today, of course, after everything we've done, we're getting better and better at it. We're actually building one right now, 4 dams on La Romaine River, and the project is about 6 months ahead of schedule and on budget, and we have a good shot at doing better than what we planned at the beginning. So, of course, we are in a very fortunate position, and what is good about that model, when you're trying to attract investor, as an example, and you can show this, and you say, hey, we can predict your cost of electricity for the long run, we have no issue at Hydro-Québec to sign even a contract, you know, for export for 20, 30 years, because we pretty much know where this is going to go. It's, you know, yes, the investment are significant at the beginning, but then after, the main driver is amortization of those assets. Of course, there's maintenance and people running those facilities, but clearly we have a very stable model. The one thing that we realized when I came on board is clearly there's been no growth on electricity. And it's not just a Quebec issue. You look at the US, I think they're consuming about 4 million terawatt hours of electricity since 2004. In Quebec, we're pretty much at 170 since 2007, so no growth. There's a limit to a company that the top line doesn't move. You know, you can work on your costs, but you've seen we've been working on costs for a long time. At some point, if you want to keep the same benefit for your shareholder, you have to look at your top line. So we're saying, okay, what are we going to do? And basically, we give ourselves the objective of doubling our revenue in the next 15 years. We're saying today our revenue line is $13.5 billion. We want to be a $27 billion company in 15 years from now. So that's the challenge we're offering ourselves, you know, which of course will increase our net income from about 3.2 billion and 5.2. Okay, and I think it's important. Yes, we're financially very healthy. You know, it's more than 23, 24%, you know, return if you look at the revenue versus the net income. So we're healthy. We're generating cash. But at the same time, there's talent that we have at Hydro-Québec that I think we can export outside of Quebec. One of them is, I was mentioning, we are renowned in the world for, you know, using new technology. We were the first one to do 735 kV line in the 60s. You know, it's only a few years ago that somebody in China especially went to 1,000 kV. But for almost 45 years, you know, we were like leading in that. But those are technology we develop at Hydro. We have a research center that's always been a cornerstone and that we're leveraging for always new technology. And we're still developing technology today that we're using. So this is something we can export. There's idea that we're using that we feel we can commercialize and sell on the market. But there's also the renown of Hydro-Québec for hydro production, but also transmission, high voltage transmission. So it's a big world, the utilities, but it's a small world at the same time. Everybody knows us for what we've done before, and we've been always very active on the world scene. So going back on the international journey is actually extremely well received and is giving us a lot of attention. So we have 3 strategies to increase our growth. So we're saying we want to double the business The first one is we can increase our export. So of course we're exporting here in Ontario. We export a lot. About half of what we export is in New England and New York, plus New Brunswick. And we have capability for more export. And I'll talk about it in a few minutes. The one thing I mentioned also, we can commercialize some of our innovative solution, and we should leverage that more. And the other thing we want to do is because of what we can do, it's not just about, you know, our financial strength, but it's also what we can bring as an operator of a network. We're looking at acquiring asset outside of Quebec, okay, which we can invest in, which we can operate if needed, or in partnership with other people. So that's what we're being started. But you have to realize that a year ago, we didn't even have an M&E team at Hydro-Québec. So we had to recreate the whole thing. Today, I have 20 very capable people within that team. We're pretty much everywhere in the world right now looking at what's possible. You know, there's no rush, there's no panic for us. We're going to take the time to make the right investment and the right move and the right acquisition, but we're very active in looking. Going back on export, I think it's important to say, you see the Quebec load is about 171 terawatt hours, as I mentioned earlier, and we are exporting around 30 terawatt hours. Half of it, a little bit more than half, is going to New England at 15, so half of our export at 30. New York is about 7.2, about 25%. Ontario is about 3.6, and also New Brunswick is about 2.4. But there's capability on our side to do more. If I look at a 5-year horizon, we believe that there's a lot of activity happening right now, you know, either here in Ontario or in New England and in New York, to look at getting more export from Hydro-Québec on hydroelectricity. First of all, we have a renewable product, okay, which was not recognized, and I don't know why at some point in the U.S., but today in those states that we are, you know, producing electricity for, it is recognized. In New England, as an example, you know, we've been putting a lot of effort, you know, early last year. There was a law, actually, that was adopted July 31st last summer that will allow the Massachusetts state to go for an RFP for 9.45 terawatt hours, which is indicated here. So we do provide 15 today, but to do this, we need to build transmission line. So we're going to be building, we have options either in Vermont, in New Hampshire, or in Maine that we're considering. We're going to be bidding on this RFP, you know, late this spring. The winner should be known by early next year. So that's an important one for us. It's happening this year. A lot of discussion also with New York, and I'll get back to that later. And of course, I'm sure, you know, I see Bruce in the room here with his team. We've signed with, we're very pleased to sign with Ontario also 2 terawatt hours of a firm contract for the next 7 years. And I think there's discussion. We'll see, you know, you guys have your situation here to see if we can do more, but there's clearly a potential in our mind using the existing infrastructure that, you know, interconnect our two provinces. I was talking about commercializing innovative solution. I'll show you, I'll mention 2 here as an example. TM4. We are producing, we did develop a technology for an electrical motor. That electrical motor today is very successful in China. And, you know, I'm sure you'll be surprised, but the Chinese are putting about 100,000 buses a year in service these days. So they did it last year, they did it the year before, 100,000 buses. So we have a joint venture in China. Last year we delivered to them 4,300 engines. The year before we were only at 800. This year we think we're going to be somewhere around 8,000 to 9,000. So that business is growing, and our timing, our product is doing extremely well. We actually have millions of hours accumulated, and it's going super well. So we're gaining market share, I would say, probably month after month, and we're very pleased with that. The other innovative solution that we are still working on today, and we're testing it, we're going to have actually 2 in service, is the big battery you see there. One of the biggest challenges in the world right now is, you know, stocking energy. Yes, when you look at the other renewable source, like solar or wind, they are what we call variable sources. You know, if the wind doesn't blow in the morning, if there's no electricity, or if the sun is not, present, then it's more difficult to get power. So when it is, and you don't use it, you want to be able to stock it in those batteries. It's not something we really need in Quebec because the battery are the big dam we have up north. This is how we stock water, and this is our battery for us. But despite that, there's applications on our network, peak shaving and things like that we can do and use that technology. But this is not a small battery. This is a 1.2 megawatt hour battery. It is going on a 53-foot long truck bed. And it can, stock a lot of energy. So this is and the difference here in our technology is, first of all, it is the safest technology. I'm sure you've heard about Samsung's phone and lithium battery. Ours cannot go on fire. It's impossible. There's no oxygen in the battery like others have. So safety-wise, it's really going well. The other thing also about this one is that we can charge and recharge the battery. Our closest competitor today is about 3,500 cycle. Ours can go to 15 to 20,000 cycle. So when you look at the dollar per charge and recharge, it's actually the lowest cost. So we have one actually in our research center, the one you see here, connected on the grid, and we're putting now into real application in one of our stations nearby Montreal. So that's two of the technology we're going to be commercializing. I was mentioning acquisition, so we're very fortunate. We just signed before Christmas a partnership with RTE, which is, I would say, similar to Hydro One here in Ontario, but in France. It's actually the biggest transmission line in Europe. They have something like close to 100,000 kilometers of transmission line. And to have access to the European market, we needed to work with someone in Europe. And actually, the partnership that did make sense for us was the one with RTE. So we're looking at asset right now in Europe with RTE that could become our asset. So we signed that partnership a few months ago. And we've been collaborating with these guys. They are extremely capable in innovation and technology also. And we've been working with them for probably 40, 50 years. So what's important is we have ambitions, in terms of doubling the revenue, but also we have a role, especially in Quebec, to build a future, but also outside of Quebec. I think everybody is aware of what COP21, agreement was about a year and a bit ago now, December 15, about limiting, the global warming to 2 degrees. And I think it's important to make sure we understand, because the scientific, and I think, there's pretty much a consensus there that 2 degrees, more than 2 degrees can raise the level of sea by about 6 meters in some area. And when you look at this map here, everywhere where it's red, it is actually, places that could be floated. And you have places like Manhattan. You have places like Miami. So we can decide to take it lightly, but I guess, this would be a big issue. So I think there is clearly momentum these days for going to more renewable power, so that we protect, our planet, and that we avoid those type of issue. But the other thing also, and I'll take the time to read something that happened this week, because everybody's asking me that question. There's a new government in place in the United States. These were the target prior to the new administration took place in terms of reducing emission. Of course, I would say every state, some of them were imposed by, the federal administration. A lot of them, I would say, were more coming from the state themselves. The state in the United States, of course, control the purchasing of their electricity, but clearly the federal also has a say somehow in some of those politics. But clearly those targets were there. I think the Americans are buying more and more in terms of, especially on the Northeast where we have our customer, they want to have more clean power. And of course, we're an instrument that can help at Hydro-Québec with our hydro capability, that target that they have. And I was very pleased. I don't know if you had a chance to read. There was a joint statement this week after Mr. Trump and Mr. Trudeau sat together. And in the joint statement, there was a lot of, hey, what are they going to say about electricity, renewable, and environment? But I think they're clearly saying that, the two countries are connected on energy. this is the biggest energy trade, in the world, and I think we both need each other. That's pretty much what they were saying. And they're saying that they're committed to improve these ties even more. They're saying we have built the world's largest energy trading relationship, and we share the goals of energy security, a robust and secure energy grid. So I think the message was pretty clear out of those discussions this week. And they're even saying that, and that's kind of the thing we've been mentioning a lot for our project in the United States. They say we remain committed to moving forward on energy infrastructure project that will create jobs while respecting the environment. And, the big project I was talking about, earlier for transmission, more transmission in the United States, they're $2 billion investment US, $2 billion in Vermont is a lot, $2 billion in New Hampshire is a lot of money, in Maine also, and they can bring more power, more clean power towards Boston and cities like Manhattan and New York. So clearly I think we're in a good position. We're going to continue to do that, and those investments in those states are creating thousands of jobs for the next 5 to 6 years. So, it looks pretty good. We're in a good position, and we're going to definitely, despite the changes that happen in Washington, we still feel good about it. And, when we say we need to help, our neighbor, if you just look at New England, if we connect a 1,000 megawatt line, this is half of their GHG gas emission reduction target that they have for, I think it's 2030. And in New York, it's about a third of their goal. So if we are successful, in winning those bids, and we can bring those lines with 2,000 megawatt, and we can even do more, those could have a serious contribution, in reducing their emission. One thing that I just want to share with you also, one thing we're discussing a lot in Quebec, and we're making progress, is about how do we replace the car that are using fuel today by electrical car more and more? It's a huge potential for us because, first of all, we're not producing any gas, okay? So any oil, we have to import everything. So in terms of, first of all, on the economy side of things, we could improve our commercial balance by about $4 billion, which is significant for Quebec. And this is, less export on oil. And of course, we have, we can charge the battery with our hydropower, and we have the availability to do that. So that would be a good thing to do. And of course, on emission, this would have a significant impact in terms of what it can contribute to. So those are things that we're looking at, an idea that we have, but clearly we're pushing very hard with the government of Quebec to have more electrical car because it makes sense for us. One thing that we're working on the culture of Hydro-Québec is we used to be very focused and say, hey, we're hydro and this is it, okay? And we're not really looking at other things around us. But I think we cannot be naive these days. We have to stand up and look at what's happening in the rest of the world. It's happening, I would say, faster in some countries because the price of electricity was higher. But it's going to happen eventually. We did a study last year with some consultant that shows that even in Quebec, with the lowest rate in North America, we think that in 23, 25, so that's kind of tomorrow morning, the price of solar and photovoltaic basically will get very close to our electricity rate. So one of the things that it's happening today is when we call decentralization is people want to have autonomy. They want to be able to produce their own energy, not for 100% of it, but for some of it. So at least keeps the light on, and so they're looking for photovoltaic, solar on the roof, and different technology. So the reality is, I was mentioning earlier, we had no growth, but with this, we're even seeing, okay, a reduction in terms of demand for in the next 10 years to happen. So if people, let's say, produce 20 to 30 terawatt hours, that means that our volume goes from 170 to 140. So the good news is we have more to export without building, which is a good thing. But at the same time, we need to do that because, we're going to have problem. If the volume goes down, then the electricity rate can clearly go up. So decentralization is something happening around the world, and we have to be ready for that. The other one is electrification. I already talked about this, so more vehicle, more everything. And digitalization is also very important. A lot of things are possible today. You can control with your iPad the temperature in your house. You can do a lot of things. And if we do integrate this well with the utilities, we can probably better manage our energy together. But if it's separate, I think it can be problematic also. I'll give you the example, and I'm sure it's the same thing in Ontario. For me, people come home at 5 o'clock at night and they start, the oven, they start the dryer, they start everything at the same time, and there's a peak in energy. You can control and manage all this. You can have the dryer working at 2 o'clock in the morning when there's less demand, and it doesn't change anything. So there's things like this that can be better planned, that we can work together. But of course, the digitalization can definitely offer some ways of doing this. We are actually, working on a few things, and I'll show you after. But clearly, also, I think those new things about electrical vehicle, rooftop solar, smart home. Here it shows what percentage of people will adopt it, per year. There's different opinion, but it's going to happen. Is it going to happen in between or something? But clearly there is a clear trend that those things are reaching us. The other thing we're doing right now, as I've mentioned, the technology, we're building 2 homes right now in Shawinigan and Quebec, and we call them the home of the future. And we're trying to put all the gizmo that you can find, and we have our researcher, our PhDs working at it. So we want to make sure that we understand what is possible, and very important, how this is going to connect with the grid, so that we see this as like a dam today. We're managing the dam and we have full control over this, but how do we integrate in our network to better manage the overall situation, the network all integrated, and what these people will be able to produce for us. So that's kind of what I wanted to share today. But before I take question, I think it's very important in Hydro-Québec right now. We mentioned at the beginning we wanted to do better, and I think we recognize, we said there's things like customer support, we don't do what we were supposed to do. And we took it back, and I think right now the people in Quebec are starting to recognize the improvement we've made. Aim high is, I think we have ambitions of doubling the size of the company, and we're going to be pushing very hard to do that via export or acquisition, and also commercializing our technology. But also we have a role in terms of building the future, working with the people in Quebec and understanding where we're all going together. And we want to have the Quebecers proud of Hydro-Québec in 50 years from now, and look behind and say, they did great things also, because we can say that from the people that were ahead of us 50 years ago or 40 years ago. Thank you.
All right, so Mr. Martel has kindly offered to answer a few questions. I'm going to choose the questions. Thank you very much for your input. We only have time for 2.
Okay.
So
sorry about that.
If you got somebody to blame, so blame me. So Mr. Martel, the dam in Northern California has been in the news of late, and the question is whether that's a risk for Quebec's source of energy, and what's Hydro-Québec's preparedness plan in that respect. Can you comment on that?
I think it would be naive to say there's no risk, and there's always a risk. Everybody understands that is in the hydro business has a risk, but the risk is minimal in Quebec. We are always in contact with the other hydro producer, learning from each other when there's issue, and making sure that we have the right inspection level. We have a lot of automated inspection, actually, and visual inspection that's happening every day, and we have a very rigorous maintenance program. So we are extremely fortunate today. We never had any accident, but when we look at things, we had risk in the past. We fixed this. We're building our infrastructure always better. So minimal risk in Quebec, actually. Thank you.
Thank you. And then lastly, the Canadian Club hosted Mr. Husklisson from Emera last week, told us about Bay of Fundy and all his projects. And the question was, does Hydro-Québec have any, I think it's noted as science fiction, but what's the next big development in terms of production of energy? Okay. You talked a little bit about the batteries.
Well, it's interesting when you look at the potential development. First of all, we're realizing today that there'll be less development probably in the next 25 years than there's been, because of what I said. People will generate a portion of what we need, and we'll all benefit of that. But clearly, Hydro-Québec is preparing, to say what's going to be the next big hydro project if we build one. We're also looking at other technology. Depending on what product we need, if we need power or if we need energy, we may decide to build a different thing. If we need power, we may consider hydro. If we need energy, we may consider solar, which is becoming very competitive. The solar farm today are starting to. So, but if you need power, that doesn't work out. So that's very important to understand that. We're looking at different options. Okay, we have about another 5-6 rivers that could be interesting in Quebec. And you know, we're never close the door also to collaboration with other provinces or other country on this topic. So that's something that we're really open to. There's nice project in other provinces also that could be possible.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to invite the president of the Club Canadien de Toronto and Vinet to formally thank Monsieur Martel.
Merci, Monsieur Martel. On behalf of the Canadian Club et du Club Canadien de Toronto, I would like to thank you for your highly engaging speech, I would say, on the future of energy in Canada and how your company is really leading the way. You are an amazing example, I may say, and I have to admit you have a very good energy, right? I couldn't go without it. Vous possédez vraiment une profonde compréhension, Monsieur Martel, de ce que les consommateurs désirent réellement et ce dont notre planète a besoin finalement. Être conscient de notre environnement, ce n'est pas juste une tendance passagère. On sait qu'il s'agit de plus en plus, c'est un mode de vie que la majorité des Canadiens et Canadiennes adoptent, ou on devrait peut-être dire adopter. Monsieur Martel, you understand very well that being environmentally conscious isn't just a passing trend. Yes, it has become a way of life for most Canadians, or should be. Hydro-Québec's response to the desire of more renewable sources of power and the importance of creating a low-carbon economy is more than admirable. And I mean it. Your approach can serve as a model, not only here in Canada, but in other markets as well around the world. Your commitment to, it seems like you have a history of quality and services in your life. And I'm going to say that your commitment to quality and services was clearly evident in the innovations and initiatives that you're championing and that you're showing us here today. Monsieur Martel, chapeau. We wish you well as you move forward with your priorities, a lot of them. Thank you very much. Et au nom de tous les gens qui sont réunis ici aujourd'hui, je vous remercie infiniment. Et longue route, Monsieur Martel, longue route.
Merci.
And before we conclude, I would like to extend another round of thanks to today's event sponsors. National Bank, thank you very much. National Bank Financial Market. Accenture, thank you very much. And McCarthy Tethrow. Why I give a little bit of emphasis today? Because today you all know it's a partnership between two clubs. And these type of events cannot be done without sponsorship. So I thank you very much for participating into this event. And we would also like to thank MediaEvents, Canada's online events space, and VVC for streamlining today's event. Talking about new technology, that's the way things are being done. And to learn more about le Club Canadien de Toronto, well, please visit our website at clubcanadien.ca. Actually, you may like to know that our next guest speaker will be March 21st, and it will be Monsieur Maxime Bernier. So this being said, thanks for joining us, and this meeting is officially adjourned. Have a great afternoon.